In the past 4 years, I've generated over $50 million creating emails for brands like Fly by Jing, Dip, and The Manshake. And in this time, I've figured out how to actually create very high converting emails. So that's why in this video, I'm going to cover my exact process for actually doing so. While most videos will involve just a few boxes being dragged around and some templates that'll just honestly never be used, in this video, I'm going to create an email from scratch. That way you know exactly how to create an email design that's going to convert. Now, before we even get started, we need to actually gather our brand assets. And really this comes down to the difference between an email that's going to flop versus an email that's going to convert like crazy. The reason being is that most people are going to want to jump straight into Figma, which is a huge mistake, because at the end of the day, a very high converting design comes down to the right imagery, the right copy, and actually understanding what a high converting email format actually looks like. So with that said, let's get right into my process of how I go about doing that. All right, so here we are inside of mill.com, which is a great search engine essentially for emails. And what we're going to want to do is that most of you are not going to know exactly how to lay out an email, just quite frankly speaking. And what we can do is actually we can rely on other brands, which do convert very, very well, to actually give us the structure that we need. So let's look at a high converting brand. Let's look at something like Grunz. We pull up Grunz. We're going to look at this brand because it's actually very similar to a brand that we're going to want to build an email for. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to build a launch kind of email. So I'm going to look around here and it looks like we got a launch that went on with this raspberry lemonade. So let's go to this. New flavor alert, looks great. And this is actually a great thing. I mean, it looks visually great. This is actually built in a very, very strong way. I love the hero section with how it's laid out with the CTA and whatnot. And as we go down, we can see exactly how they're laying this out. They're going through some daily benefits, doing a good infographic here, pointing out the product. I like the way that this email is laid out. It's very, very clear. CTAs are great. So I think this is a great spot as far as a potential thing that we can use as a email design example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this email. I'm going to throw it into Figma for later. And we're going to go on to the next step. All right, so here we are on the site for the brand that we're going to actually do this email design on, which is Despierta. What we're going to want to do is we're going to actually try and do a product launch email. Now, obviously they are not launching this product, but we're going to do this as an example. We're going to do this for the product called Celestial Calm. And what we're going to want to do whenever we work with any kind of brand. Now, typically, if you're working with a brand, you might actually have access to this pretty quickly. But if you're working with a brand that you haven't worked with, what you can do is you can actually pull a lot of the assets that you're going to need, because you're going to need imagery, like we spoke about. You're going to need fonts, you're going to need logos, and all of that can be pulled from the brand's website. What this can be done with is you can either, in this case, for example, go to inspect, or you can run up your console. So you can run like this, and this is how you're going to actually pull a lot of the assets that you want to use. So for example, if I wanted to pull the fonts, I'm going to go here, I'm going to hit the network tab. I'm doing this inside of Google Chrome right now. And if I refresh this page, I'm actually going to have every single one of the fonts that are used on the site right here. And if I wanted to download these, I'm just going to double click and it's going to download each of these things. And then I'm going to have those font files. Now I may have to convert them into usable versions because the w.off you're not going to be able to use, but you can convert those using something like a cloud convert like I have up here to actually convert those into usable things like a TTF or an OTF. So with that being said, we're also going to shop around for some imagery. I'm loving this image right here. So like we did before, I'm going to inspect the element here. I'm going to pull it here. I'm going to see that there's a image here. And what I can do here is I can actually pull this piece. So if I click on here, click on this, I can actually go in there and just download the image. Pretty simple, pretty straight to the point. We're going to download that. Looks great. Looks fantastic. I'm going to look around. I'm going to potentially download some other imagery, but this is a great way to go about doing so. What you can also use are some tools. Like I have this one called CSS Peeper, which allows you to quickly, if you wanted to, pull the colors of the website. You can also pull some assets here and also see the typography. So if I wanted to know, for example, which font this is Wilkista. Don't know exactly that font, not as big one, but Grotesque is being used here on the H2 level, looks like, and on the body, it's also using Grotesque, which is great. And we can also pull things like the logo as well. So if I wanted to pull a logo, let's inspect that element. Let's go down to here. You typically have different multiples here, a 1x, 2x, and 3x version, depending on the size. And then we're going to click on this again, and we can download that logo as well. So I'm going to save that. Perfect. And as we go through, it obviously, different ways, things that we can download. I'm going to want to also pull a product image because this is obviously just not only the piece. So if I go to the shop page, it looks like we have something here. And we're going to, again, do an inspect element. This is a big cheat code, if you will, in terms of getting these assets. I'm going to dig into here a little bit. We're going to dig into that. And you can break it down usually by what it's highlighting. And if you don't understand any kind of CSS or whatnot, click around until you find it. You'll probably find it. In this case, here's the exact image that we're after, which is the PNG with the transparent background. So let's do that. Let's download that. And there we go. From there, I've pretty much had all the assets that at least I'm after at this moment. We have our fonts, we have our logo, and now we have our imagery. Now, if you want to generate more revenue for your brand through emails and you don't want to spend countless hours designing the emails yourself, book a call using the first link in the description. We've helped Fly by Jing, for example, sell out their entire ketchup launch, and we think we can do the same exact thing for yours. So if this is something you're interested in, book a call using the first link in the description. Obviously, I can continue to download imagery that I see. Instagram is also a great place to get imagery for different brands and whatnot, but this is obviously a very, very rapid and quick way to at least pull from the site, which is obviously best way to get the brand assets. So with that being said, what you then want to do is to convert any of that into usable pieces. A lot of this is going to download as a .webp. So you may have to use something like a Cloud Convert to actually convert those. Now, obviously I'm going to skip through this. So you guys don't need to watch me convert my files. But once I'm done with that, we'll move on to the next piece. All right, now that I'm done converting the actual files and making sure that they're in a usable format so that when we go to the design process, it's actually very straightforward and we can use everything. I want to make sure that I'm also pulling language and getting a good understanding of the product. So I'm going to read through the copy here, get an idea of the way that people are talking in this, the brand voice and whatnot. So that when we do write the thing, for example, I'm looking at CTA language. I'm looking at, let's go to the homepage of the website here. Awaken the magic within. Loving the language here, very, I'm going to call it very fairy-like in a way. So I love exactly kind of, obviously I'm loving the imagery that I'm seeing here. It's great imagery, loving the CTA language, getting a good idea of how they're kind of talking as far as the, the way that they're actually speaking in terms of brand voice. And I'm going to use this as far as when I'm going to actually put together said info, for the actual email when you go launch it. So, looking at things like the info, looking at what it's formulated with, looking at reviews, what it may assist with. This is all great information. And so when we go to generator copy, and if you decide to write the copy yourself, you can also use potentially the help of AI like ChatGPT. Obviously, make sure you're keeping in account how the brand is sounding. You want to send on, on voice and whatnot. Make sure we're not mixing things up too much. But with that said, once we have the copy, we can then move on to the next step, which is moving into design, which is obviously the exciting part. Now that we have our brand assets ready, we can finally get to the exciting part, which is actually jumping into Figma and getting right into the design process. So let's get into Figma and we'll go right through it. All right, so here in Figma, we're going to open up a new design file. So we're going to go up to the top, hit plus, hit design, and we're going to be brought into our working area. In this case, I'm going to want to bring in all of the assets that we've since downloaded. So let's bring them in one by one. We're going to bring in our product image. We're going to bring in our imagery. That's more of a, I'm going to call it more of a, not lifestyle, but more interesting of an image with some, different elements going on with it. We're going to want to bring in our logo for sure. So let's put that in, let's plop that in there. And then let's bring in our email design that we wanted to look at as an example, right? So we have our inspiration here as well. We're going to keep that here. And then we're going to also want to do is we're going to want to pull any colors to brand colors. So in this case, make this a 500 by 500 thing. Let's go back to the website really quick. And actually I already had it pulled up there, but let's go through it again. We're going to want to pull any colors that we want to pull into here. So it looks like the brand colors in this case is purple that they're running, 798 instances of it. We're going to copy that code right there. We're going to go back and we're just going to leave it here just so that when we do need to work around with it, we can do so. All right, so now let's actually get to creating the email. So we're going to want to use a frame. To do that, you're going to either use the frame tool here at the bottom, or you can click the F key and we're going to drag and drop that. And we're going to want to set it to 1200 pixels wide. You might be asking, hey, Aaron, why are you designing 1200 pixels versus 600 pixels? The reason is because yes, while we can, try and conform things to the 600 pixel width, we do want to get as much resolution as we can. And quite honestly, it's just a little bit easier to work with more because you can always, bring it down and compress it down to 600 pixels if you need to. But when you do upload a 1200 pixel wide thing into Klaviyo or whatever you might be using as your ESP, you actually are going to see much, much better clarity. And that's honestly just worth it when it comes down to making sure that your designs are shining through. So now that we're here, let's get into designing it. So with an email, it's always going to start with really just the logo portion at the top and then the hero section. So let's design both of those. So for one, we're going to pull our logo. So let's copy that and let's drag it over here to our email. Let's go over here. Let's blow this up to 75 pixels in height. Looks like a good size for this specific logo. Let's drag it into there. And then let's make sure we then move into building our hero section. So hero section, typically going to be based off of some kind of lifestyle image. In this case, if we're looking at this, Grunz was using a product image, which I think is great, obviously with some different things. So let's do a very, very similar thing with Despierta here with Celestial Calm. Let's drag and drop that into our frame here. Let's resize that a little bit. In this case, let's actually just bring it down to 1200 pixels so we can use the entire thing. And let's center that up right there. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. All right, sweet. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to start wanting to bring in our copy. So as far as our copy, I went through and actually went and just generated this through ChatGPT, just to make this easy and quick. All right, so our headline, what we're gonna wanna do is use the text tool, drag and drop this in here. We're gonna put in rediscover sleep, and then we're gonna want to use those fonts that we're using before. So if I remember, this is the font that they're using for the headers, and we're gonna want to go ahead and blow that up. So let's blow that up to like 80 and see what that looks like. Like we can go definitely a little bit bigger. So let's do that. Let's go up to 100. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. So this is already a great font. Let's shrink what this is as far as the sizing between these. Let's drop this down to like 110%. Let's go up to 120. Yeah, I'm liking what I'm seeing there. I do like to design all of my emails for center. So let's do this. Let's remove the space there, do it like this and drop it like this. All right, sweet. So what you're looking at right now is it's pretty basic. You know, you're probably looking at this and like, hey, this doesn't look great. And I agree with you. What we need to actually work on right now is we do need to work on the transition. And what this can be done as far as, you know, this is a little secret that I like to do, is I like to actually create a thing to extend the image itself. This is very, very easy to do. So I'm going to create a rectangle in here. I'm going to go into the fill section. I'm going to click on the gradient, make it a linear one. I'm going to add in a few points here. So I'm going to add in one at 80%, one at 60%, one at 40%, and then one at 20%. And then what we're going to want to do is pull the colors for each of these. So you're going to go here, you're going to go to your dropper tool, click on this, and you can do this for every single thing right below the point that you're sampling at. And as we go down, what you're going to see here is a gradient's going to be formed that is going to allow us to essentially very easily extend this background without it looking like we're actually doing anything to it. Now, you actually can do this in Photoshop very easily using their AI tool, but what you get here is you actually get this perfectly extended piece right here, which looks fantastic. And then as we go to here, I'm not liking the black. Let's either convert it to the purple, and let's try like this. So let's go over here. Let's use our dropping tool here and go touch this. This looks okay. I do potentially want to try something, and let's see what this looks like in white. Might be a little bright. So let's go back to the purple. Looks perfect. Let's stick to that. And then at the top here, just because I want to keep this looking pretty strong, let's actually not do that. Let's add in a line. So we're going to put this line here starting at the corner here, going like this. And what that does is we get this nice transition from top to bottom. So we have that headline there, which looks fantastic. And what we're going to want to do now is we're going to add some subheader copy. So let's go through here, add our text. We're going to add in this sub headline. See what this looks like. Too big right now. We're going down to grotesque, MTD STD, which is what the font was from there. And we're going to drop this something more approachable. Now, keep in mind, obviously, that we're still designing for our mobile. So under this, let's do that. Let's go like this. Let's go down to our colors, and let's make this a little bit bigger. I'm not liking how big this is. Let's jump this up to 32, because you can't see that before inside of the mobile. So now what we're doing, looking at this, I'm going to pull this up into here. Looks a little bit better. I still want to go a little bit bigger. Let's go up to 38. Still, a little bit big. Let's go to 36. Let's make this a little bit wider. Let's drop this in the middle. Looks fantastic. So we already got our sub headline there. Let's go ahead and add in our CTA button. So to design a button, all it's really going to be is a rectangle with some text over it. So you're going to click R. We're going to create our rectangle here. And very, very similar to how we went through and made some edits to really any of these things, we're going to go through and go up here now to our, actually, why am I blanking on this here? We're gonna actually go ahead and change the corner radius. In this case, let's look at the website to get some ideas on what CTA should look like. In this case, it's more of a pill-shaped button. So let's do the same thing there. Let's try this at 30, see what that looks like. Not enough. Let's just throw it up to 100. Honestly, doesn't matter. And now we got a pill-shaped button, which looks fantastic. But let's try and do something actually pretty fun. Let's actually try and recreate this exact same style as what we're seeing here. So it looks like it's a purple kind of transition. So let's do that. Let's make that the fill. And let's actually make this, sorry, should have said the stroke, like that 2 pixels wide. And then the fill itself is going to be the same gradient we had from here, up here. So let's do this. Can I copy this? I can. There we go. So that's a nice little button that we put in there. It's actually very, very similar to the background here, but I'm going to make this a little bit darker at some of the ends. So in this case, let's do this. Let's remove these 3 rings here in the middle. Let's draw this to this, and then let's go ahead and make these a little bit darker. So we just get some more color off of this button. Looks fantastic. So let's go ahead now and add in the CTA. So we can go ahead and just duplicate our piece here, and we're going to add in our CTA. So in this case, we're going to do shop celestial calm. Let's do it all in caps to match the style from before. Let's just do it like this. Perfect. And then we're going to want to center this at the button itself. So in this case, it looks like the text is not quite here. Let's do it like this. There we go. And let's center this within the middle of the button. Looks great. Let's make the button just a little bit wider and then center the button. And then what we're going to want to do is select these both, and we're going to group it. You can either right click up here and hit group, or we can do Command G and group them. Looks fantastic. Let's actually change the button text to be white, as I just want to see what that looks like really quick. Honestly, I'm not loving it. Let's go back to the purple. Let's stick with that. That looks fantastic. So now we've got our header, we've got our subheader here, and we have our CTA. That's a great hero section. And I think we're off to a very, very strong start. I'm liking how this email is coming together. But either way, now that we've designed a very, very high converting hero section that's going to grab their attention, we now need to design the body section, which is actually going to move the person potentially towards actually buying the product. So with that being said, a lot of this does come down to transitions. So let's look at what that exactly means and how you can actually do that yourself. All right, let's design next a product review section. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to keep it such that we kind of shift things around. So before we had a wave type of pattern going into something. So I'm going to pull the section from above, which I think is actually a great color asset. And we're going to add a top and bottom to this. So let's add an effect. We're going to add stroke to the, sorry, not an effect, a stroke. And we're going to do this specifically to the top and bottom. So we're going to put 0 and 0 for the sides. And then on the top and bottom, we're going to add let's do 3. And we're going to add it as a purple top and bottom. Now that I think about it, I should adjust this up here. And we're going to add a product review in here. So like crafting a section like this, I think is a pretty good way to go about the transition and whatnot. So what we're going to want to do is let's add in a rectangle section. I think the color in this case can be something a little bit more of the tan variety. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull something like this, and we're going to lighten it up. So we're going to pull up to the left a little bit. Great. And then let's add some edges here. Let's do like a 30. We're going to add a stroke to the inside like so. And this gives us a very good canvas to at least work on. You know, I'm actually going to want this to be a little bit more of the tan yellow like this. Yeah, that looks great. All right. Perfect. All right, so let's get the review in here. So let's put the text in. Elixir to rest. We're going to bold that out. Looks great. Let's put this to our purple. Looks perfect. We're going to use a very, very similar format to what the actual review itself looks like. Let's copy and paste this out. Let's unbold this. And let's pull the review from the actual site. Let's drop this in here. Perfect. We're going to left justify it. Put this to the right. Looks perfect. And then we're going to want to do this. Let's add in some stars. So we actually do have that as a piece here. So let's do that. Let's put these as 60 by 60, and then let's fill it with purple. So we're going to go like this, like so. And then let's put names as well. Names always increase conversion rates, so make sure we get those included. Perfect. Just put in there. And then what I like to do too, if possible, is add in the actual product. So let's do that because we actually do have the asset. See what that looks like this. We can always play around with that. So let's try this. Let's make it a little bit like this. Maybe we like it straight. Pull this thing down here. Beautiful. I actually do like it like this. Let's put it like this actually so that it's like this. Let's add that in. And then from there, we have ourselves a review. Let's actually make this a white background. Let's see what this looks like really quick. I actually think that looks a whole lot better now that I'm looking at it. Let's make this slightly bigger. Perfect. We're going to drag and drop this up. I think that looks great. And then we added ourselves a great review. So now that we're at this point, what we're going to want to now add is we're going to add a footer section, which is very, very important because it's a great way to finish off our email. So let's go down to the bottom and let's add that in. This does not need to be anything special. It should include the basics. I always like to conclude with some kind of logo at the bottom. Always easy to do. So let's put that down there. And then we're going to want to add the pieces of text that we need to add in. So let's do this. Let's go in and add our pieces of text. For example, let's do like this. We're going to want to underline that as such. And then typically this text is a little bit smaller. So let's do that really quick. And then with every email, there's always going to be some kind of address. But in this case, for example, let's also add in any of this, address information, if there's any kind of terms of service, privacy policy, etc. From there, let's add just a little bit of height. Oh, way too much. Like that. And then from there, we have ourselves a full email that is ready to go out and send. And just like our example over here, we have some very, very good imagery being used here. We have on the right side our hero section, followed by a section covering the actual product, and even a review of said product being used here, which I think is a great addition. So overall, I think this is a pretty good email and definitely can be sent out and actually is built in a way that would convert very, very well. We have two different CTAs being added at this point. So I see this as a very, very strong email. All right, so now that we've wrapped up things inside of Figma, I'm going to put the full email design up on display now for you to see. That being said, I'm actually very, very happy with how things turned out. So at this point, you should be able to design your own high converting email inside of Figma, just following the same steps I went through. That being said, I also did not cover exactly how to put together a profitable strategy. So if you do want to see how I was able to generate $30 million and the strategy behind that in the last 12 months, view the video right here. With that being said, I'd appreciate a like on the video. And if you want to see more of this content, feel free to subscribe. That being said, I'll see you guys on the next one.